Oh, that was supposed to be a fade in, fade out. It didn't work.
That's okay.
Good morning, Melissa. How are you?
Good morning, Leslie. I am awesome. How are you?
Good. Uh, I'm just turning on, for some reason, we are live. It says it. I'm getting a message from StreamYard. Can't post some comments to destination. So it may be slow with getting comments, or we may be talking to ourselves and people will just have to watch the recording.
I talk
So
to
I'll
myself quite a
watch.
lot. It's okay.
There's always like tech issue. There's multiple tech issues calling in today, and I'm not even talking straight. So if you can hear us, welcome. Where are you tuning in from? We want to know. I'm Leslie Nydick, and I'm tuning in from New York City with beautiful blue skies today, even though it's hot out there.
Oh, we're getting some comments. People are here. They were able to get in.
Yay! Oh, and Zarina is first. Zarina, I need to thank you, like with everyone hearing us. Thank you for hosting our event and encouraging other people to attend. So I'm sure some of your connections will be here today. Uh, good morning to LinkedIn user. If I was on LinkedIn, I'd see who you are. Uh, Charity, hello, lovelies. I love that. Kimberly Arnold, it is so early for you,
Yes.
so thank you. Um, and Rhiannon, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. You can correct me later. That's what your name is in my head every time I read it. So welcome, and I'm glad you're here.
I'm going to go
Leah,
with Mac's song, Leslie, and say it's Rhiannon, but I could be wrong too.
and yay, Leah, someone I met. It's now a year or two since we met. Thank you for joining in from Milwaukee. And Lauren is here. Thank you, everyone. We're so glad you're here. Uh, anyone else coming in? Tell us where you're like calling in from. What time? We have a couple of minutes to like chat. I know that we can even use it as a lesson. Like, so Melissa had a little bit of tech issues. You're lucky she's here because you were going to only listen to me for a half hour.
It was a little stressful. So, but luckily I have very formal IT training, which is just reboot. It solves all problems.
It, it solves all problems with the computer, with our phones, with ourselves. Like
Yes,
just reboot.
that's right.
The other one, oh, Lincoln, great, you're here. Thank you. And you must be the LinkedIn user. We're glad you're here. Um, I was very friendly with some IT help desk people back when I worked in corporate. And the first question they would always ask everyone is, okay, I know your computer's not working, or whatever device wasn't working. They're like, do me a favor, look at the wall. And they'd be like, oh, okay, I'll look at the wall. Look down. And they're like, and now look at the outlet and see if the plug is actually in the outlet.
Yep.
And 90% of their cases were solved that way. And then the other ones got solved. 9% got solved by the rebooting. And then there was always that 1%. A few more people. Sushmit, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. We're glad you're here from India. So far, you're the longest distance. So let's get started. Welcome everyone who's been here before. Welcome to our new viewers. We're really glad you're here. This is Let's Talk About It, Careers, Business, and LinkedIn, hosted by, oh, I'm looking in the wrong direction. Melissa Cohen and myself, Leslie Nydick. Episode 9, Navigating the Global Workplace. And specifically, we're going to talk about CQ, cultural intelligence today, and we'll do that shortly. But let's start with introductions. Melissa, you're up.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm Melissa Cohen. I am the good witch of LinkedIn. And my goal through that is to help my clients to love LinkedIn as much as I do, which is a lot. And I work with people on LinkedIn profile optimization, LinkedIn presence, thought leadership, and content creation. Just like Leslie, I'm here in New York City, and I'm so excited to see everyone today and to have this conversation. This is a really important topic to me personally.
Definitely. We're going to get into it in a moment. So, I'm the conflict strategist. I do get you unstuck from conflict. Like Melissa, I love sharing my tips, and I do that on LinkedIn. And I also have a blog of bite sized strategies named The Strats. If you'd like to subscribe or just read them, they're very quick to read, but with a lot of impact. You can find that on my website, not surprisingly called theconflictstrategist.com. If you do need support for a specific conflict, I did just launch a new service called the Conflict Tune Up. I'm still offering some special pricing. And if that's something you're interested in, you could also find it on the services page on my website. And I welcome questions with no obligation. So feel free to ask. And one more thing, something that I love doing, and I know Melissa does too, engaging in the comments. So after this live, expect to see some notifications in your LinkedIn account, because we will look at your comments, reply to them, and I hope it sparks more conversations, because that's really why we're here. So we're gonna move on. Oh, I didn't want to do that question yet, so I'm gonna hide it. I first wanted to share, most of us have heard of IQ, the measure of intelligence. Also, EQ has been a very trending topic and popular topic for a long time. And that's the measure of our emotional intelligence. Both very necessary, and I don't think there's much dispute with that. The forgotten one is CQ, cultural intelligence, and that's what we want to about today. It refers to someone's capability to function effectively in culturally diverse settings, which we each find ourselves in. So before we get to our main topic, we want to engage all of you in the comments. So we have some questions, and we want to know what your answers. A little bit of trivia. When was CQ, cultural intelligence, introduced? Now, if Melissa read my notes for today, she probably already knows the answer.
I
So we
did
have
know you.
So we have people to say hello to. Oh, Raquel is here from Houston, and it is lovely to see you too. We have a lot of LinkedIn users, and you know what? This is happening to a lot of people. So whoever's experiencing this LinkedIn user thing, it's not just you. One of the LinkedIn updates must have changed something, because I'm noticing this on a lot of lives that people's settings are off. They try to fix them and it's still not fixed. So we'll see who you are when we get back to LinkedIn. But if you know you're showing up as a LinkedIn user, just include your name so we know you're here. But we're great. We're really glad you're here. So guesses for a year. When was CQ introduced as a concept is what I really mean. It's not that the need didn't exist. Anyone have guesses? And of course, I think LinkedIn is slow because I see a delay with the comments. I'm not going to keep you guessing. I'll tell you. Um, as per Wikipedia, London Business School professor P. Christopher Early and Nanyang Business School professor Soon Ong introduced the concept and before I guess it, I see that Lauren guessed 2021. Interesting year to guess. But the year was 2003. And it kind of just makes you go, I wonder why then it wasn't its own issue or topic. So next up, again, we want this one makes you go more than on the answer. What percent, what percentage, sorry, of business leaders lack cultural intelligence? We want to know your guesses. Did the answer surprise you, Melissa, as much as it did me?
Yes and no. Yes and no. I mean, yes. And yet at the same time, when I thought about it, it made a lot of sense from experiences that I've had and things that I've seen.
So I'm going to read something from Sophia. Hi, Sophia. It's a longer one, so I'm just going to read it versus having it cover us completely. Culture is so important, whether in a company or other environments. And people come from different backgrounds. So being able to navigate culture, create a positive culture is so important. Thank you for this conversation. And thank you for being here. So we do have some guesses. 55 to 60%. Lauren is guessing 65%. Um, Kimberly is guessing 78%. And with that, if we were doing one of those game shows, like without going over who's the winner, oh, 67% by drum roll, please. I don't know if that was my
I think
connection,
I
but
think so,
for
I'm not sure. It's okay. We're all
so
back.
lovely. I'm glad you're all still here. I'm here. So the answer is, according to research that was published by School of CEOs, 76% of senior business leaders lack cultural intelligence. I mean, just really think about that. It obviously it hinders their chances of creating a greater sense of belonging and inclusion within their teams. My comment about that number 76%, I mean, in some ways it doesn't surprise me, but it is surprising that it's like real and it's scary. I'm just it explains a lot. What do you think, Melissa?
You asked if it surprised me, and my first thought was, yeah, of course it does, because that's three quarters, right? Three quarters of leadership are lacking the skill, but it also doesn't surprise me because I see this happening a lot in business situations, even just, in casual one-on-one conversations, just a sort of lack of awareness of that what's perfectly acceptable in our culture or in our day-to-day might really be a big faux pas or just really unheard of in someone else's culture. And I think we always have to keep that top of
Great point. So now we really want to get into the main topic about why we're here to share what we know. And we really want to hear what you know and what your experience is. So, my first question to Melissa is, what experience in your career, in your life, increased your awareness of the need for cultural intelligence?
mind. Yeah, so lots of things. I mean, so first, I live in New York City, same as you, one of the biggest, cultural melting pots in the world. We have people who visit here and who live here from pretty much any country on the globe. And so that's always made me very aware of different cultures. Also, I travel. Well, not as much as I used to, but I traveled a lot for work. I traveled extensively throughout Asia. I traveled extensively in South and Central America. And so that really helped to make me aware of cultural differences and cultural norms. And, just a silly example, right, of something that I hadn't thought twice about until it was pointed out to me. So I work with a lot of teams overseas, right, in my fashion days. And so I was communicating with a team in Asia and a team in India on a regular basis. And India is part of Asia, but not historically thought of that way. And our emails would get super lengthy, right? Because we would like write comments to each other's points back and forth. And to make it easier, we would sometimes put our comments in a different color, right? To make it easier to read. Well, one time I used red. And I got a little note on the side like, "Hey, Melissa, I'm sure you don't know this, but that's perceived as very aggressive. You shouldn't do that." And I had no idea, and I really appreciated that, right? And it wasn't said in a nasty way. It wasn't taken personally because the person knew that I just didn't know, right? I was young. I was just, starting to communicate with these teams, and I really appreciated that insight. And so I never did that again. And then I, in turn, coached younger people on my teams as I, moved ahead in my career that yep, color coding is great, but like let's not use red because it has some cultural significance that we don't associate it with.
Wow. It's the red and most of my life, red was my favorite color, so it would have been hard for
Yeah.
me to see or realize that other people see it as aggressive. So for me, it was also like work related where it was just part of my day to day. So I have to say that I didn't really think about it. And I'll tell you why. My career started in organizations where I was managing all the real estate and design and construction. And for some organizations, it was international. I was accustomed to dealing with phone calls 24 hours a day and different meetings. And I knew I had to figure out how to communicate with people from different cultures. It just was kind of part of my everyday. I wasn't so increasingly aware that it was a need. It just was luckily it pretty much came naturally to me to ask a lot of questions and that helped. But there was a light bulb moment for me when I realized, oh, we have to be a little more intentional with recognizing how important this is. About 10 years ago, someone approached me and said, I know you do training in communication and negotiation. So, can you lead a training in cross cultural communication? And it was the first time I heard even just that term used. They had several international groups that were coming to the US and they wanted to learn to effectively communicate in the American like business workplace. And it just increased my awareness that when we are from different cultures, we miscommunicate with each other as often as we're communicating. And we really do need to increase our awareness because by accident, we keep on miscommunicating. And we could choose to increase our cultural intelligence. And I realized how important it is because look at us, we're all in global workplaces and look at where we're speaking right now on LinkedIn. This is the absolute global workplace and one of the, I believe, the largest global workplaces that exists. And we need to really realize like how colors are perceived, how words are perceived. Uh, it's just so important to increase our awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when you meet in person, right? In some cultures, giving someone a hug is expected. In some cultures, it's very that's like reserved for family, right? If you were to give someone a hug, it's very inappropriate. And it's really important to understand these differences when you travel, when you meet people. In some countries, if you go into someone's home, the first thing you do is take off your shoes. If you were to leave your shoes on, it's considered a major faux pas. And in other countries, no one would think twice about it. So you really hit on something important. And I think we're going to talk about this in a minute, but, you know, be curious, ask questions. If you don't know, ask.
Yes, absolutely. So
Ah,
we're going to get to our tips. So, Melissa, I'd love for you to share two of your best tips of how to increase our cultural intelligence.
yeah. So I think I just spoiled one, which is just ask questions, right? Be curious. And that can be in different ways. It can be asking someone if you know someone who lives in another country or who comes from a different cultural background. Ask questions. I have friends and acquaintances and colleagues around the world, and I always ask them, "Hey, I'm coming to, travel in a few weeks. What is the norm for this situation?" Or how is this particular thing perceived? Because it just saves a lot of trouble, and it's also interesting, right? I have always been fascinated by other cultures. My major in college was Italian language and literature, and I studied abroad in Italy. And I think that that really opened my eyes and opened my mind to the fact that different countries have fascinating, cultural histories, cultural norms that are very different from the US. And then I would say my other tip is just, don't take things personally. If you make a mistake, it's okay as long as it's not intentional, right? If you do something intentionally offensive, of course that's not okay. But most people, like my example with the email, right? The person wasn't offended because they knew I didn't know any better. They wanted to teach me and I wanted to learn. And I think that's really important, right? Be open to learning and be open to the fact that it's okay to make a mistake and to just do better the next time because that's just how life is, right? We're all learning constantly every day.
I love that. I love it applies to cultural intelligence or it applies to anything. Like just let's not hesitate to learn. It's okay to make a mistake. It's just what we do with it afterwards that makes the difference of whether someone will accept it as something positive or negative. I really love that. Um, One of my first tip that I thought of, something that I wasn't aware of until I started teaching that workshop in cross-cultural communications. I don't know if anyone's heard these words, high context and low context communication. And I could tell you that's one of the really big keys to being able to communicate more effectively across cultures. It is the cause of a lot of miscommunication and it often leads to conflict. That's how I got exposed to it. So what is it? So high context is usually described as very nuanced. Communication is implied, not directly expressed, and some people refer to it as reading between the lines. And at the other end of the spectrum is low context, which is much more precise, straightforward messages, and even spoken language is often interpreted at face value or expected in that way. And then, of course, there's a lot of in between. So, my tip is to increase your awareness that there is this spectrum of communication so that you could better communicate with those who are not in the same context because otherwise don't assume they are. And this is so important. I mentioned it before on LinkedIn when you're writing a comment or your post. Now, you can't write for everyone to interpret it the same way. Everyone's an individual, but just be aware that when you get a comment that asks a question or says something completely different than what you express, you realize, well, use that as an opportunity for a conversation. And again, it goes back to what Melissa's tip was. Like, it's okay for us not to get it right or for someone to interpret what you said differently. Just use it as something to spark conversation and just move forward and be excited that it's not just a comment that sits there. The conversation is there. And my second tip, it really touches on what Melissa already said about asking just a specific way. So we all need more cultural intelligence. No matter what, you can't possibly know every culture, every geography. Just look at even the United States. You can just go to a different part of the United States and there's a different cultural intelligence that you need. So if someone says something and you think you know what they mean, you might say, "Oh, yes, I know what you mean." But do you? So instead, let's check in more. It feels awkward at first, but I might say, instead of thinking I know what they mean, I'll say, "Oh, what I think you said or what I heard is X, Y, and Z. Did I get that right?" If you can get used to checking in versus thinking there'll be a lot less miscommunication. So that's my tip. Say and ask more, and there'll be an increase of cultural intelligence for both of you and better communication for sure.
I love that, Leslie. And I think you touched on something really important, right? In certain cultures, it's the norm to be very direct or, what we might call blunt. In other cultures, that is completely not acceptable. And so you'll get a very surface level kind of statement that, to your point, you have to dig a little bit to get to the heart of what's really being said. And even then, you might never get, the way like a New Yorker is kind of blunt, right? And we're very direct and we just tell you what's on our mind. Even within the US in different regions, that's not always the norm. There are parts of the US that are a little more, I don't want to say polite, but a little more reserved in the way they express things. And I think that's a great distinction. Always ask questions and make sure that you really understand what's being said.
You reminded me of, yes, like as New Yorkers or people in the United States, we think we're like the most direct and blunt, and we just get to the point, particularly in business. Well, I worked for an international company that I found out there is a country and a region that's more blunt than us. And it just like, I had no idea. I thought there was like no emotion also in how they spoke. And it took me a little bit of adjustment to figure it out. But it became more interesting to realize, like, sometimes we'd all look at each other and go, "Yeah, we need to say that again. What did you say?" Because we knew we were, like, on 2 different planes of interpreting.
And Kimberly, I want to
But
really go to Kimberly's comment, if you don't mind, because
no, thank you for pointing it out because 'cause I'm trying let me try to get to
she said something so important because she's talking about acronyms, right? Acronyms in your workplace. And this happened to me all the time. Even as an employee of the organization, it took me a while to understand what all of these acronyms meant, right? Because every company has their own internal language and their own acronyms for things. And if we have a hard time understanding it, just imagine how our clients feel or the people that we're communicating with feel if we start to use those acronyms out of, even in context, but without explaining what they mean. So I thought that was just a really great point and something that I always tried to be cognizant of. Don't assume that everyone knows what a KPI is. Like, we think everyone knows what a KPI is, but I've had people
I
ask me,
did.
what's a KPI? And so just always spelling it out just allows for better communication and no misinterpretation.
I'm smiling. Thank you, Kimberly, for bringing that up. Thank you, Melissa, for pointing out the comments. We have a lot of comments today, so I'm not catching all of them. So I have one of my strats is PDUA. So most people don't know what it is. And it's please don't use acronyms. It is the easiest way to isolate people. I just remember sitting in one meeting at a company and the acronyms were flying back and forth and they all looked at me like, "So, what do you think?" I'm like, I've missed the whole hour because I was so busy trying to figure out the acronyms, even KPI. For some reason, that's one that never sticks in my head. But they were using acronyms for departments, for like actions that they take. I just said it sounded like you were talking some other language, and then you feel dumb and afraid to ask because everyone else is engaged in the conversation.
And yet I'll
So
bet
great
a
point.
few of them didn't know what it meant either. They just didn't want to admit it.
Exactly. Oh, yes. I got after the meeting, there were people who came up to me, goes, "Oh my God, thank you for saying that."
Exactly.
Um, yeah, here's another good point. It's not polite to be blunt or direct in my culture. Thank you for bringing that up, Raquel, because then it's hard to do it in cultures that expect it. So it goes in all multi-directional of how uncomfortable it can be. And what's another point? From the Midwest, and we are definitely more reserved, but I appreciate the differences in cultural communication. Thank you for bringing that up, Lauren. There are so many great comments here. I can't wait to get into them. But guess what? It's that time. It goes
Whoa.
by very quickly. We want to, we appreciate your time. We want to honor the time. So, like we said, we're going to get back in to the comments after this event.
These comments are
Thank you for
awesome.
being
I'm just telling you, I'm cracking up reading them.
I can't wait. I see things about Southern hospitality, um, the pearls, everything. I can't wait. Um, so this is a monthly event about conversations between Melissa and me and all of you. So we can't wait to continue it. We look forward to seeing you in July. We'll announce the date and the topic soon. But before we sign off, Melissa, please, like your closing words.
Oh gosh, I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today and for really just adding so much value and so much engagement in the comments. If y'all know me on LinkedIn, the comments are my favorite part, and you guys did not disappoint. Thank you so much. And as Leslie said, she and I will be answering all of you throughout the day.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.